about adjusted term structure models, adjusted one-factor term structure models, and we're slightly confused. We'll just go over what confusion we had. First of all, we defined the multivariate Kalman filter, then we also defined the log likelihood function with, if we call flag, then it will have a restriction. If we don't call flag, then it will not have a restriction. With that, we defined our estimate the parameters with the restrictions, so calling the flag. But however, we initialized our parameters here. The only difference is when we call the flag, basically we had a diagonal matrix of phi, where we had with phi had a restriction. If we don't call flag, phi don't have a restriction. However, our point of confusion is that we estimate our parameters with restrictions. Well, phi was restricted to be 10h. But the problem the next when we say that we re-estimate without the restrictions. However, in the initialization process, again we used beta hat parameters from earlier estimation and we restricted phi. This was only because this was in initialization, but as the system initialized, it don't have in the algorithm that it follows, it don't have the phi restriction on phi. So this time we'll have a non-restricted parameter estimated, but this is we are doing for standard errors. So we will estimate Hessian, and inverse of Hessian is our standard error. So that's all that we needed for term structure. Okay, so we talked about terms and term structures earlier. And now let's see what we're going to talk about. So adjusted term. First, let's clear up the RAM slightly so we get a bit quicker views. So we had term figure is something that we don't need as well. Term figure. And what else don't we need? So multi is not, we have covered that too. Multi and smoothening factor, we have covered all of these, and multi. Here is also smoothening, we have covered. Multi we have covered. So now let's see what else is to talk about. Now we have alternative, we are talking about alternative formulation of Kalman filter. From just what we discussed, we are going to talk about factor models and from the extension of Kalman filter discussion, right? An alternative way to express the state space. Oh, we did that. Oh, sorry. We already talked about that. So now factor var model of the term structure. The data are daily United States returns beginning from 1990 to 2006, 4,000 data with maturities ranging from 1 to 30 years, and we have up to 30 variables. Consider the vector var model with 30 variables and k is equal to 3 factors, where we have an additional exogenous variable now. Just something we were talking about is equal to lambda s plus gamma y t-1 plus ut with 0 r and 0 q being the mean and variance, in which we know that lambda is a rectangular matrix 30 by 3, which is n by k matrix. Gamma on the other hand is a square matrix, which is a 30 by 30 matrix. So lambda is a 30 by 3, gamma is a square matrix. These are factors. Phi is because we are going up to 3 autoregressive parameters, phi is a square matrix, as well as q is a square matrix 3 by 3 that corresponds to phi. R on the other hand is also square matrix, but that will correspond to, interestingly, that will correspond to this factor, which is gamma. There is a very easy way to remember, because they are the variances from different equations, and we're looking into the latest one. So obviously R will be correspond to gamma and Q will be correspond to phi. Q will also correspond to S, because the factor that will derive will have similar sized to Q. Well, U will be correspond to R. So letting Y represent a 30 by 1 vector, because we have n 30 vectors here, one column, in one column 30 by 1 vector of yields 30 rows in one column, again because 30 years. So Y is representing the variables, and 3 factors is a 30 by 1 vector of yields that are first standardized, have zero mean, unit variance. Estimate the parameter of the model using stock conversion, which is principal component analysis. So we first standardize, then we plot the estimated factor loading of lambda and show. So we do PCA step by step from here. Then we are to plot the estimated factor loading of lambda and show that k is equal to 3 factor represent level, slope and curvature factors. Okay, so you need to show that each factor represent level, slope and curvature factors consistent with the analysis term structure by Ness, Litterman and Schneckman. Fine. This is a 30 by 1 vector, very important and very interesting. We have n is equal to 30, where we have time is equal to the total period is 4142, but the maturities are ranging from 1 to 30 years, so n is equal to 30. So we'll have to do a replication, interpret the dynamic interrelationship among the factors using the estimator of phi. Fine. Repeat parts A to C for k is equal to 4 factors. Discuss the interpretation of the 4th factor. So what? So the 3 factors are level, slope and curvature, as we said earlier. These will capture, the factors will capture level, slope and curvature, and 4th factor we are not sure, but we'll estimate from there. So LFAC F bar is going to be an interesting one. Okay, F bar. LFAC F bar. Oh, here we have it. This is the problem that we have, and here from here we have LFAC F bar. Beautiful. Now let's jump into this discussion. Okay, so first we need to create a local variable for stock version, otherwise we're gonna do a principal component analysis estimation. And what these steps do we recall? Very simple steps, right? We had in our stock version, first is we need to estimate the generalized models. Okay, estimation, right? Just give me 1 second to stop talking about these steps. So first we need to standardize generalize Y, which is to have zero mean and unit variance, that is given in the question already. Then we do principal component decomposition on the standardized Y variable to find initial values, estimates of k factors, which are S. K factors will be estimated with S, and that is the magnitude of eigenvalues will be represented by S. In the first, second and third factors, each will represent different terms, level, slope and curvature. So then with the estimated S, we will do a regression of, we'll kind of find the residual equation by regressing Y on S and the lag. Okay, doing that we'll find the lambda and gamma. Then we'll do represent with the residual, and again, given that value, residual's value, we will do principal component decomposition again for S, and we'll find new lambda and gamma. We'll continue to do it until, because we know that as n and t tends to infinity, the lambdas will become consistent. Okay, y becomes a consistent estimator of s, and lambdas become consistent, that will not change so until any more changes happen to values of lambda and gamma, that will continue. And when there will be no changes happening, that is the maximized value of factor that we have, and that we will use to find autoregressive parameter. Beautiful. That is the steps in a nutshell. So what are the process that we do? We'll need a while loop. So first load our data, find, then standardize the data, step 1. So z score. Okay, we're gonna standardize the data. Z score, it's not that easy in R. So first R, we create an array of zeros with rows and columns combined. Then for I is equal to, so to store the data, very simple. For I is equal to sequence of number of columns, where ci is number of columns, 1 to number of columns, that will, so that will be the else minus the mean. So yi minus mean of I divided by standard deviation, very simple. Yi mean I divided by standard deviation for everyone, actually from I equals 1 to number of all the elements, so in the columns, number of columns. So that is our standardization approach. So number of dependent variables we have is, again, number of dependent variables we have is number of rows and number of columns, and k is equal to 3 factors, because curvature, slope, and what do we want to capture? We want to capture level, slope, and curvature. And then so we'll have to find the lambda and gamma many times, that, but we will define the zeros later depending on what we need. So lambda nu and gamma nu, again we'll do this later. So we want to say that we want maximum 100 iterations to happen, and our default convergence criteria is 0.001 convergence criteria tolerance. So allow for a very good number of tolerance until the means actually converge. If you can remember the diffuse prior theory, until the means completely converge. So that is beautiful, right? So estimate the ever parameters using the Stock-Watson algorithm. So first we'll initiate our comments, where iterate 1, then we'll give you the termination later. So start with 1, the first one. Then while this command previous text progress bar minimum 0 max is maximum number of iterations, style 3 gives you a progress bar. Okay, fine. So as long as iteration is less than or equal the maximum number of iteration 100, we do principal component analysis, right? We have principal component analysis function, we'll probably use it. So first let's find eigenvalues of, so you do correlation of y, so eigens correlation coefficient of y. So find the eigenvalues on the correlation coefficient of y. So decomposition, we are doing principal component decomposition, and what we'll have is that correlation coefficient of y vectors, we'll take the vectors. So eigens core eigen y, right? So what is that we are finding? Okay, let's have a look. I thought we would be directly using principal component analysis function because I'm sure that we have it. Anyway, still we'll find online if we are kind of like confused with some function in R. In MATLAB, R's description system is not very good, so we'll just look for it in MATLAB. We'll just Google it. VA and VE, what is that storing? That is the question. Lambda and gamma. All right. So y lambda s is equal to Oh, all right. I think I got it, but still, yeah, if you can see, you'll understand very simply. You remember what is the structure of lambda? N by k, right? And so S is equal to y lambda. So we are estimating S. It's simple. Okay, so what was the command? Eigens, eigs, eigens, magnitude of eigenvalues. I'm looking for the eigenvalues here. So principal component decomposition. We want to estimate initial estimation of k factors. K is based on eigenvalues, subset of eigenvalues and eigenvectors when I call for it. Subset of eigenvalues and eigenvectors. So eigenvalue a by k returns the k largest magnitude eigenvalues. Returns the k largest magnitude eigenvalues, right? So that's what in our question is, because theoretically we remember the specific comment that in the step 2 we perform a principal component decomposition on the standardized y variables to obtain an initial estimate of k factors, where k is based on the magnitude of eigenvalues. So k, magnitude of eigenvalues, when we pass this command. So ak gives you magnitude of eigenvalues located in found in lambda and gamma. So you are basically estimating k magnitude of eigenvalues and eigenvectors. So we have eigenvalues and eigenvectors that we are going to use, right? VD returns diagonal matrix containing the eigenvalues on the main diagonal and matrix V. So D is the matrix where eigenvalues are, so it's a diagonal matrix. D creates a diagonal matrix and V are eigenvectors, gives you a vector and a diagonal matrix. You can use any of the input argument combination. So fine. K largest magnitude so it's the second input to compute a specific number of largest eigenvalues. We are looking for the largest eigenvalues. Okay. All right. So correlation coefficient. So Y has how many elements? Y has all rows 1 to 30 columns. So Y has many variables. We do correlation. We take the correlation coefficient of all the variables here. Okay. And then we look for the maximum eigenvalues here, where VA is the vector eigenvectors, K vectors, and VE is actually the diagonal representation where the eigenvalues are located diagonally. So lambda, right? S lambda, we are talking, S lambda. So lambda in vector and in diagonal matrix presented. So basically that's the same thing. Beautiful. So basically here we are just finding the vector, we are not specifying this. So first we find correlation of all the vectors you have, and then you run this function eigen or eigs. Nowadays you have PCA directly. However, you run eigen or eigs because we want the maximum number of eigenvalues, only the maximum number of eigenvalues. Okay, and k maximum k5, not maximum number of eigenvalues, the magnitude of eigenvalues, the highest magnitude of the eigenvalues, or the highest k's. We are looking for the highest k's. So the highest magnitudes that we have will help us to find S. S is simply y lambda for all rows 1 to k columns. Beautiful, because S is a k by k matrix, right? S is a k by 1 matrix, sorry, k by 1 matrix. So all rows and 1 to k columns S, k by 1 matrix. So if S is equal to y lambda, that's very simple, because y is equal to lambda S, so it's the same thing, multiply that to y and you have S. Now step 3, regress y on x and y on S and y t minus 1 until there is convergence. So let's do the regression. First we have so we represent y lag, as we know how we do it, 0 1. Then we represent b, which is we are regressing yt on st and yit minus 1. So st and yit minus 1, yt is being regressed on st and yit minus 1, right? So how we do it here, level is being regressed on st and yit minus 1. So basically we are adjusting for the dimension so that the dimensions don't mismatch, column bind so that they are in one column, minus 1, and we take the coefficient, only the coefficient. So the whole thing is being regressed, the level is being regressed on yt. So we did a regression and we have lambda and gamma. And what is lambda? Where is lambda located and where is gamma located? From the coefficients we see lambda is v is equal to 1 to k up to k rows, and gamma is k plus 1. So up until 1 to k we have lambda, then the next from k plus 1 we have gamma. Now and then we represent the whole thing in the residual, which is redefining yi is yt minus gamma yt minus 1, right? Gamma into yt minus 1, which is exogenous variable, that will have the first element to be 0, then y lag. Why the first element is 0? Because in that case, to understand why the first element will be 0, we might have to go back to the theory, and we know that in the theory, well, we have seen in the matrix structure the first element is generally 0. Basically we are doing it to remove the initialization effect, that's all, nothing else. And also number of dimensions will match. These two are the most important factor. So this is the basic equation structure, right? Lambda is v is equal to 1 to k, gamma is vk plus 1, blah blah blah. Column binds C00 y lag, because we are making it the size of regular y. Very simple. Y lag is one size small, that's all. Now let's put all these in loop. So y will be in loop indeed, because for all y's from y1 to n, then because of so many y's we have a lambda vector, we have a gamma vector, lambda vector. Lambda is basically n by k, I rows, k columns, but gamma is a n by n matrix, I rows, I columns. Okay, gamma is a n by n matrix for rows and columns. Remember that is the one most important part where you might make mistake. Gamma is a square matrix, lambda is not a square matrix. Lambda depends on number of iterations. Gamma is a square matrix, so that's why it has nothing to do with k, but it has everything to do with everything to do with n. So I is a big one, it's a big matrix, 30 by 30, as we know from here. Gamma is basically 30 by 30 diagonal matrix, right? 30 by 3, I rows, k and y, I. So we represent it again. Now you know, so where in all places of y that will rotate, we will change. In all places of gamma, things will change, and we put this all in a loop function for 1 to n. So you'll see the system might have something that will store zeros for lambda and gamma. So n rows k column, gamma, zeros n by n column. So this is the first for loop. Remember, this is still under a while loop. Okay, so we are starting the algorithm. We did find the first, we standardize first. We are going to use the standardized results. Then we did a principal component analysis. Then we did a third step regression. Now we are going to check for convergence. If square root of summation of vector, so lambda minus nu, the lambda is this, and the lambda nu lambda is this, that is being estimated. Lambda nu is lambda zeros. Okay, each time I want the system to store the lambda values in lambda nu and gamma values in gamma nu. Whenever this is being replaced, lambda nu will store lambda and gamma nu will store gamma, but that will be in the next stage. First is to fill this up, then is to replace lambda nu and gamma nu. So lambda is previous step, lambda nu is the next step, because it is being filled up each time. Lambda is the earlier value, lambda nu is the next value. Beautiful trick, a beautiful trick. So check one, see lambda and lambda nu. Check 2, we have also estimated gamma nu. The new value and the older value difference is being checked. So if the square root of the summation of, we want this to be lambdas to be vectorized. Okay, we're doing a lot of things, conditions together. So we want vector of lambda is not a vector. Gamma, we want vector of gamma is not a vector. They're all what? They're all matrices, right? So vector, we sum all m up. So vectorizing, the vector is being squared. Vector is being squared, right? Okay, fine. Is it squared because we're actually doing variances, I guess. Yeah. If the summation is less than tolerance, default tolerance, if the square root of, the square root, all right, and the square root is gone. Summation squared, square root is less than tolerance, and square root of gamma is less than tolerance. If this is less than tolerance, and for lambda and for gamma is less than tolerance, then we will simply break the if else function. Up until is less than tolerance, we'll simply break. Remember, we are in a while loop. Yeah, set text progress bar, not very important. Else lambda nu will take lambda value, gamma nu will take gamma value, and this is the update criteria. Okay, so it will continue. Otherwise, it will, remember, if you don't keep this update condition, then the whole system will stuck in the first stage and you will be crashing the machine. So each time the iteration will progress one by one. So iteration starts at 1 and the iteration will now progress. Very simple. So what is the trick? What did we do here? We did principal component analysis. We took correlation coefficient of all the elements. Then we looked for the maximum k eigenvalue magnitude by eigen, and we took the vector. Okay, and we simply do eigenvector is simply lambda y to find s. Very simple. Then we do some regression, basic regression, not a big deal. We did some regression, and the regression gives us the first elements are lambdas, then the next elements from lambda. When lambda ends, gamma begins. That is what is suggested. We made sure that the structure remains same, and we also did the recalculation, readjustment, then in a for loop, then also in a if else function we checked for convergence, everything else being under while loop. Well, we just put when to break and when not to, and beautiful. So now we do regression. As we have found the values, we are gonna simply find phi, and phi is simply, simply st minus 1 regressed on st. So st regressed on st minus 1, coefficient is phi. So scale lambda, so shock is positive shock to interest rate. So we're just gonna scale lambda for a positive shock. Basically this is beautiful. Lambda is being scaled, gamma diagonal elements are taken of the gamma because gamma is a matrix, phi, and we're just gonna graph what we're gonna put against what. I mean, over time we're gonna just graph lambda. Okay, for level, slope, and curvature, because so as we just put lambda in, we'll capture the level, slope, and curvature. So plot t and lambda for all. So okay, so in columns, we're just gonna plot the columns together, all together, no, columns 2, column 3. So the three factors are actually captured. Very simple and very easy, very interesting. All right, so we solved number 5. Then comes sampling properties of the principal component estimator, or LFAC panic. Okay, panic model. So let's go into LFAC panic and let's see how that works out for us. LFAC panic, and we have here the panic model. We did not open the panic model. Okay, let's see. Let's open the panic model. Basically, there is one thing to remember. I'm sure we don't have to do the principal component estimation the way we did, because I think we have principal component function right now available for R and MATLAB both, and we can simply estimate our model with principal component, calling the principal component analysis function. However, the only difficulty with the last problem we had is the nested loops. So the for loop for the second stage regression and the updating, falls under, okay, let me first open it, falls under the for loop, right? And then we counter our while loop with, the updates. But before we counter our while loop, we had a if logic. So the if logic looks for the logic, when to create the counter is important, when to set the counter is important. So the logic sets the counter, and then based on that, based on the logic, we allow the counter to take place. And while loop is a very simple function. Estimations happen in for loop. While loop is a very simple function. Anyway, the if comes to match with the default criteria, and inside while loop, if is a additional nested loop, where for is, so think about the structure. While loop is the big with the counter, big function. Inside we need a if to set a condition against another condition. Okay, fine. So set your estimations against another condition. Very simple representation. But before that, in a for loop, in between them, in a for loop, you estimate the parameters that we'll use for the condition. That's all. Still, it's not very easy. Probably people will make a lot of mistakes in doing that, but it was fun. One classic example of programming where all the complex ideas are combined into a nested loop and gives you a very good idea how difficult mathematical programming is. I'm gonna take a small break. Coffee is needed. Sampling properties of the principal components estimator. Consider a k is equal to 1 factor panic model. So why k factors is changing? If we want to capture multiple characteristics, then the number of k or lambda changes. Beautiful, right? If we are talking about k is equal to 3 factor, we have seen 3 different factors are captured. If we are talking about 4 factors, 4 different factors are captured. So k is equal to 1 factor panic model, and where the panic model, the only change it brings is that you see there is no autoregressive parameter. It's a panic model, it's a fixed effect model, because it's based on well, panic model stands for what? Panic model stands for the whole abbreviation. It's a panel model, right? It's a panel estimation model. And so yeah, panic model stands I'm sorry, I'm gonna look for it, give me 1 second. Panic model stands for panel model. So panic model stands for panel analysis of non-stationarity in idiosyncratic and common components. Okay, where there is not regressive parameter in our panic model, in which we have omega, and omega captures what? Omega captures the dynamic effects of ui on, sorry, delta I captures the dynamic effects of UIT and Y1T, and omega is 0, mean sigma square variance, as we already know. Kind of like you can play with omega. Is diffuse prior, for diffuse prior. So we want to estimate the Stokes-Watson estimator of lambda is based on estimating the factor S from a principal component decomposition of y, just like before, and regressing y on a constant and S, just like before. Compute mean, bias, and maximum mean squared error of the sampling distribution, because we want to see which in what case mean squared error drops, right? Because if mean squared error drops, then that part of the model is, that specific method for which mean squared error drops is acceptable. What we are trying to prove here is that as we know, as long as we don't have a residual, as long as Stokes-Watson method is good as long as our residual is stationary. If our residual is non-stationary, then we have to take first difference and not Stokes-Watson. So by NG method, how do we compare which method is good? By simply seeing which produces less mean squared error. Lambda for cross section of n is equal to 10, 30, 50 idiosyncratic dynamics for delta is equal to 0, 0.51 and sample size t100. Choose 5000 replications. So do a Stokes-Watson with these initial values, lambda, where cross sections for delta is equal to 0.51, n is equal to 10, 30, 50, idiosyncratic dynamics. By specifying idiosyncratic dynamics, what I'm trying to say is that different types of different sizes of variables, and I'm gonna do by NG, which is based on delta y and delta s, basically first differences, and compare and see which one is the best one. So this one is delta specifies the stationarity condition according to the equation, right? and so it must be within the unit circle to be stationary. As long as delta is stationary, is fine. As delta increases, maximum mean square error increases. Delta is less than 1, it is stationary. As soon as delta becomes 1, then it's non-stationary, and maybe by ng is better than the stock Watson. So that's what we are gonna test. So let's look for, now we don't have any local functions, so we're gonna randomly generate values, and we don't have any values. So let's do the setting first. Okay, then create the panic model function, and setting is t is equal to 200 observations given to us, 50 number of dependent variables given to us in the question, right? Number of dependent variables is 50. Okay, so starting with testing with n is equal to 50, k is equal to 1 factor, number of draws 5000 replications, lambda is 1, choose lambda parameters n 1. Okay, lambda parameters is, we are choosing lambda parameters to be loading parameters. Factor loading is 1 1. Okay, so 1 plus random number of n rows 1 column. So basically it is growing up by 1 with the random number generated. So randomly generating this. Delta parameter same for is a constant parameter, and delta is 0.40, 0.51. we're taking 1, the highest delta. This we'll think about later. Let's see. So to simulate data, we have omega, random number tn. We have omega here. We want to find u. U can be estimated with a recursive estimation, recursively estimating w. So if x is w, then what was our inputs in so idiosyncrasies is captured with this Rex order. What was our input? First this is x w, then why not initial value, 0s 1 rows n column, row 1 up until n column, and lag parameter is delta into 1s. Delta is 0.1, diffuse prior into 1s, 1 row n column. That is the lag parameter. That is generally the structure, or you can say you can do it other way around. However, Rex order is first. Recursive estimation is done with omega being the x, row bind replicate 0 rows n columns is why not initial value replicate 0 n times, so 1 row, so just a vector, 0 vector, because omega is a vector, t rows n columns, omega is a matrix, I'm sorry, omega, so why not initial value is a vector. So this is n by k, this is p by k, and this will also be p by k. They will have the same dimension. This is a different dimension. Delta diffuse prior multiple ones, 1 row n columns. So up until that point of delta is created, which is kind of like representing or giving our autoregressive parameter. V is equal to omega is random t, and then you have u, which is created with Rex error. Then you have to define v as well. This is created in a random setting. This is created, then this is being created. V is being created in a random setting. Okay, s. Now given v, we can find s2 with a Rex error. Again with a Rex error based on v. Initial value 0, 1 is the 1 lag, and then s is s, standardizing s, so z score, simply z score of s, Rex error, column bind, right? V was not a transposed function, was it? Probably, I'm not sure. Probably t rows 1 column. This was a vector indeed. R norm, so however, just to be sure, let's put everything in vector size, column bind, blah blah blah. Row bind in rows. They are in columns, not in elements are not in columns but in rows. Omega zeros, one row n column. Replicate one row, zeros in one row n columns. So this is rows, this is being created by rows. Hence, because this is being created by rows, this will also be created by rows. Why this is important? Because you see the dimension for XOR must be maintained. And what is the dimension? N by k, p by k, p by k, n by k, p by k, p by k, again n by k, p by k, p by k. So this is n by k, t rows, and n by k, k is maintained, p by k, p by k, n by k, n by k, p by k, p by k. Remember that, again remember that is the basic of doing this math. So well, it's not. Then we have to find y from there, which is basically nothing but times s and lambda transpose, just like before. So from s we find lambda, very simple. So this is what we did, principal component estimation. And then iteration 1 to n rows. So we are not thinking about the for loop again. Then the first difference, we take dy, first difference of the data. So we take the first difference of the data. Now first difference of the data. Now principal, again we are gonna do the same thing, but this time we use principal component function. We could have done it way before, man, but hey, let's do it now. Principal component function, and we are just estimating for s in principal component function. I'm just gonna look for how principal component function stands, just to show you. So if you do the principal component function, you see this thing. We don't have print comp anymore, rather we use PCA, as I told you. So the coefficient and the score is what we are looking for. We can also find the latent and t-square and everything basically. So p score, latent, t-square from our ingredients, latent factors, the factor loading. So the latent factor is currently we are looking for score. However, we can find everything almost, latent and everything, so it's PCA. So what do we have? Returns a latent vector containing the eigenvalues of the covariance matrix of x. X returns latent, which is a vector containing the eigenvalues of the covariance matrix, return score. So basically we have to run everything for the system to return score. The principal component scores, or S, the representation of x in the principal component space. So rows represent observations, columns to components, then latent, lambda, s lambda, you can find everything, and t-square. Vector contain eigenvalues of the covariance matrix of S. So the eigenvalues is also found and everything. So very simple. Later we don't, from now on we don't have print comp, we have PCA, right? And I hope for R this is true too, but I think R still takes print comp because it's not changing. Anyway, so you use we use principal component analysis for Stokes-Watson, and we have S, the scores. Principal component analysis, S is just the scores, and we take all rows and 1 to k columns, and this is important because of the dimension. L rows and 1 to k columns, right? First k principal components, and then we do a standardization. We took a standardized version. So with S is up to k, here is k, because we know the dimension of S, right? Dimension of S is a k by 1, So 1 rows 1 to k columns, and we use by ng with the first difference. So simply again you do the same thing. Then we estimate the factor loadings. This factor loading that we are finding is not necessary, the function can do it for us anyway. Here we are doing it anyways. So factor loading is simply with S regression. I mean, this is because it's an exogenous representation. We are doing ones and S because we are talking about an exogenous representation in this problem. So we simply regress for factor loading. This will still be, the factor loading will be directly estimated. You don't need this. However, let's do it. Regressing for factor loading and find the coefficient. And now this is the first stage of equation done, right? And then comes lambda, and then comes lambda, which will go up to iteration. So we will now, this system will now generate many lambdas, and each lambda is basically the vector will be corresponding to your vector. Obviously this is lambda. So iteration from two rows, all columns, iteration, so 2 rows all columns, 2 rows all columns, only the second row where the slope is located. Only in all columns we're looking for this like second row, and the difference is there. Regressing y on S dy is the same thing as regression here, and all elements are being saved. Iteration, number of iterations, so starts from 2. Okay, it starts from 2 because the first one has the lambda value that we estimated, and from the second one it starts generating. So now you see for loop is being required here because okay fine, we don't have to start from 2 because b is already lambda. Now from 2 we want to start generating. So now introduce iteration for loop, put the whole algorithm in a for loop function. Who needs zeros? Lambda w needs zeros, lambda bn needs zeros. How many times? Number of rows and n columns times. Very simple. Then we just plot them, and then we also do maximum squared errors, mean squared errors. So we take a mean of lambda, which is being updated just like before, minus the previous lambda, the beginning lambda. So lambda is random, and the lambda that is being generated, and lambda that we used as for random generation. So basically we are looking for mean squared errors here because this is Gaussian creation, so they have a normality assumption. So our lambda will basically show you very close to mean reversion. So that's all. Very, 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 very simple, nothing to panic about. And there is some updates in this code. Okay, you don't need to do the whole thing anymore. Just PCI after DS, just put lambda and it will find lambda for you, in both cases, and then you can simply let these lines will actually be removed, but the next iteration will remain, start from 2. So that's fine. Okay, what else problems do we have? Hodrick-Prescott is a different type of problem. Multi-factor models of spreads with money shocks, ex-ante real interest rate, capital asset pricing model, business cycle. Quite a few problems we have. We can go into talking about so sampling is done. Let's have a look how multi-factor model of spreads with money shocks work, because the Hodrick filter is not very important for us. So this problem suggests again a sip of coffee. So let's have a look into the problem. Y is a 5x1 vector containing the spreads adjusted to have zero mean and expressed in basis points. Between the 1 year forward rate maturing at different periods and 1 year interest rate, estimate two-factor model by maximum likelihood methods. Okay, so two-factor model maximum by k is equal to 2 by maximum likelihood methods. So two lambdas is 1, 2 and up to 5 years, because y is a 5 vector, then S will and autoregressive parameters will comply to this two-factor. This is the exogenous variable that we are talking about, and this controlling for these lambdas we can capture a lot of stuff. Money factor, X is the money factor, R is diagonal, Q is identity. We know we have to set someone to be 1 zeros so that we can find him. Interpret parameter vectors lambdas, because we want these, not these, so these are identity metrics. Now let's test restrictions for it. Extend analysis to include a set of macroeconomic shocks given by capacity utilization, consumer confidence, CPI, advanced GDP, blah blah blah. Extend analysis by assigning money shocks to first factor and the macroeconomic shocks. So assign money shock here, macroeconomic shocks here, and see how this works. So okay, why not? Multi-factor model, LFAX spreads. Goodbye panic. It was nice. Now LFAX spreads. Do we have obviously we have additional local function, because first we need to create a wrapper function to call the Kalman filter. So flag two situations and unpack the parameter. Lambda is 1 to 5, 6 to 10. Okay, so we have two factor. Okay, lambda first factor is up to 1 to 5, lambda 1, because there will be different shocks going into the system, and 6 to 10 is the second factor. Gamma is 18 and 19, so in between 10 and 17 there must be something. Yeah, obviously if flag the 5 parameters, there is if constraints, then put 10h and 5 is 16 and 17. If not, then simply this. So unknown parameter lambda, gamma, phi, rq. R is diagonal 11 to 15, because how many? 11 to 15, because we have 5 squared. We have R for each of, we kind of have R for each sigma square variance, diagonal of sigma square variance, which comply to number of vectors. So there will be 5 R, very simple, 5 variances, 5 equations. K is equal to identity, because as K is equal to 2 factor, size is 2, so very simple. Then it takes the negative likelihood of the Kalman algorithm, Kalman function minus 1, log likelihood function. And then, so where is the maximum likelihood estimation? Maximum likelihood is located in the Kalman algorithm. Just like before, no change. We start doing the Kalman algorithm. Okay, zeros, then diffuse factor model 0.1, diffuse prior 0.1, then mu1 0, v1 0, as we have done before. The prediction error, log likelihood function, multivariate, so with n. Then Kalman gain equation, kappa. With kappa we have S11 and P11 updated. Then we do main loop, which starts from 2 to t. So we start prediction, we improve our S11 with phi S0 plus gamma xi, phi S0 plus, as we know, gamma xi is coming from exogenous portion. So gamma xi. This is again coming from the exogenous equation, and something we need to remember, we can't forget, because we have an exogenous expansion to this model, which is gamma. Okay, so gamma xi, then variance is as it is of phi square p naught plus q. Then we update our observation, log likelihood function, and updating. So Kalman algorithm, okay, with a little bit of change, which is this part, the exogenous, which will go into S, just that once, just once. And so we're just gonna call this function here in this ultimate estimation. We bring in the data, we compute spreads relative to 1 year. So we just compute the spreads in any ways we want. We can just compute the spreads. Instead of doing that, we can just compute the spreads directly in Excel and bring it, instead of doing all the problem here. We want to create how many times, I'm not sure, replications. We might want to show replications, so 100,000 is being multiplied. Money shock, we have this and this. So flag 1 constraint. With the constraints, we allow the system to estimate all these parameters. X equals money, so exogenous variable. You see, now we not only have y, we also have x. X is equal to money, y is equal to something. Then without restrictions, to get standard error, we just put restriction on phi in initialization, that's all, in nowhere else, and get the standard errors. So log likelihood function, we have the parameters estimated. So that's it, that is the question. The question is asking us to find the parameters, right, with restriction and non-restrictions, which control the interpret the parameter vector. I just want to find lambda 1 and lambda 2, which control the effect of money shocks on the factor. Money shocks on the first factor, this both has money shocks only, so that's why, but we split it because we just want to find L for money shocks as an exogenous variable only. We can expand this equation, okay, and by creating another shock, bringing in another shock, we just need to increase another variable everywhere in this part, in Kalman algorithm, and in other places as well. So a very simple problem, just estimation with, as we have done before. Okay, we are done with alpha spreads. Then comes ex ante real interest rate. In ex ante, this time we are going to have to set lambdas to ones because we want to find Q. The data are monthly, consisting of the United States Consumer Price Index and the 1 month euro-dollar rate from January 1971 to December 2009, a total of 468 observations. So this is the state space model. Again, there is not a regressive. Okay, there is no lambda because we don't want lambda. As I just told you, we want Q, in which y is exposed real interest rate, which is realized. ST plus alpha is the ex ante real interest rate, which we will forecast. Ut is the expectation error in measuring inflation. Exposed real interest rate is specified with this equation. Parameters alpha, phi, by maximum likelihood is dependent to compute the unconditional mean and variance fx and compare these estimates with the corresponding sample moments of exposed real interest rate. So let's find the ex ante and compare that with the moments of exposed. Computer time series using alpha comparator exposed. Okay, fine. Quite a lot of stuff. What is the problem here again? The problem is LFAC ex ante. Okay. So obviously this problem will start with log likelihood function. What are we looking for here? We're looking for parameters to estimate alpha, phi, sigma square v, and we have both conditional and unconditional. So function is alpha, phi, sigma square v. Yeah, alpha phi, because alpha is more important this time, not lambda. We are not doing lambda. B, all the parameters, y, and then flag. Alpha is equal to b1, lambda is 1. Now flag is restriction and non-restriction. Lambda is 1 because in our question it is mentioned 1 will be 1. So we're putting lambda 1 so that we can find sigma square v. Otherwise you had to put sigma square v1 for proper specification that we just discussed in our theory. So v3 square, v4 square, and then log likelihood function y phi lambda rq alpha, all the elements. And this could have been Kalman instead of log likelihood, Kalman instead of log likelihood. That's what we have been doing. It's just a bit of fun to confuse people, that's all, nothing else. Okay, and then Kalman multivariate, just like before. Yeah, you remember this equation, initialization? Obviously, why don't you remember it? This is identity. We choose k square so that it matches the dimension of autoregressive parameter. Identity minus phi Kronecker phi. Phi Kronecker phi has a bigger dimension, so I want identity to take on the dimension that is in the denominator. In the numerator, what do you have? The whole thing is inversed. In the numerator you have q, and that will take up to k rows and k columns. Okay, up to number of the factor, rest we don't need. So we want to reshape this to take k rows and k columns, because q is k rows k column, and p is variance is q actually. Then rest is as before. We continue, no changes. Even in S, no changes because there is no exogenous variable, no changes. Smooth factor, right? Do you remember how to do smooth factor? Again, we start with restrictions phi for smooth factor. Then we do a lot of array allocations. Why? Because we do reverse calculation. So st, lambda, bt, up to this is fine. So first in smooth factor we define all the initialization. That means the first all the equations come in, but our variance is three-dimensional. If we can remember. We do the main loop as well. Then we do smooth factor, where we take observation stage minus prediction stage. So you see P11 is the update which will be used for prediction, 1 all rows all t minus j, minus P10 which is observation prediction. So estimated in just before prediction. So these two differences are taken. These two differences we use for our j and for SS. This we have shown before, exactly the same. Kind of a bit difficult, but we just have to remember when to bring in the prediction estimate and to bring in the smooth estimate. So the difference is that. So I'm not going to go on explaining this. If you want to see how that has been explained, you have to watch the previous earlier videos for smooth factor. And then we have all these equations and we just estimate because it's ex ante. The only difference with ex ante is that we need q, we don't need lambda. That's all, nothing else. Everything else exactly is same. real interest rate update. Well, kf smooth, we call for the function because this function takes in what? Fact is 11 kf smooth v1. Okay, just call for this function. This is the new ex-ante real interest rate and plot it. Call for the kf smooth function. So this is ex-ante smooth factor. What was the equation? Okay, let me help you out if you are kind of stuck here, and I know it's a bit of pain. J is P11 phi transpose divided by P21. So P11, all rows, all columns, P is three-dimensional. T minus J, J is 1 to T minus 1, indeed, because 1 to T minus 1 means up until how we reach. J is T minus J, T11 phi inverse, and P21, 2 is P10, P10 is update, which is PT, and P11 is here P0. So that's it. P0 is updating from here, so P21 T1, and this is S1, all S1 for all elements. That was the equation. So T minus J is S1 for all elements equals S11, which is coming from here, S11 initialization, plus J multiplied to S2 for all elements, T minus J plus 1 for all elements, minus S2 1, T minus J plus 1 1. So you might be thinking, in place of 1 we have all elements, okay, because we are talking about a vector, not a univariate model. Univariate model is easy to remember. So 1 1, so Tj again was P11, not for all elements, this is just 1, and P21, this is P21, S is S11, S2 minus S2 for all elements minus S2 1. That was the basic equation to remember. The game is with the loops and the dimension that we need to remember. Okay, and we have it. There is something called SECA, sequential. SECA, what does SECA do is that it starts the plot here, it increases the plot with up to these steps, and it ends, and it's the total number of values is this. So it starts and it will continue to increase the steps up until total number of values are achieved, right? So SECA and plot this against ex ante and y. Beautiful. That will give you a beautiful forecast. It will be a forecast of interest rates against y. Beautiful, right? K smooth is very important because it's smooth factors. It is basically forecast. It gives you a smoothened forecast. So ex ante interest rate, we can use it for many purposes. And then the next is KPM model. I'm really not interested in KPM, okay, and I'll probably just, I know it is based on estimation, so I'm probably gonna just skip it, okay. If you really want to know about KPM, please email me and I can share the code with you. But the fact is, I'm not interested, or I'm not very much, excited about KPM. It's about estimation, and as you can see, there is no tweak here, it's just estimation. smooth factor and everything, and you bring everything in and you just estimate parameters. Beta, you just estimate beta, regress beta, that's all. I mean, I'm not really interested. Let's look into I mean, what I'll do is that in this problem I'll okay, no, I'll actually not talk about cable. If you need, you just email me. LFAC business cycle. The data are monthly, consisting of 6 Australian indicators on the business cycle. 6 Australian indicators we have, and the coincident index beginning in January. So number of observations are given. It's a one factor model. And business cycle is quite important because it has something different compared to before. Let's see how is it different, because as we studied before, smoothing was important for term, but for business cycle smoothing is not that important. For business cycle, let me just find it out. Oh no, I was wrong. For business cycle, the whole element smoothing is important. Fixed interval smoothing for business cycle, historically it provides better information with the KF smooth in business cycle. So we'll do KF smooth. It uses all of the sample data. In ex ante, on the other hand, S1 0 was fine enough, but S1 5 or the smoothing factor is important for business cycle. So we have y defined with this equation, centered to have 0 mean, parameters lambda 1 to lambda 6, phi 1, phi 2, sigma squared to sigma 6. Okay, fine. Estimate business cycle. Compare the turning points of two estimators. In comparison the two estimators, so estimate the business cycle using smooth conditional mean and the usual estimate based on coincident index, and compare the turning points of these two estimators. So first we're gonna find conditional mean based on smoothened, usual estimate based on coincident index. What is the coincident index? The coincident index beginning in January 19, consider is equal to GDP, unemployment rate, and employment rate, retail sales, household, and the coincident index. 6 indicators, and we have a coincident index. We have 6 indicators and a coincident index. So CIT minus 12. All right. So coincident index, smoothened conditional mean, and the usual estimate based on the, okay, we do smoothened and we do non-smoothened. Okay, and turning points, we need to find the turning points in two estimates. It may be helpful to rescale to have the same sample variance. In comparing to it may be helpful to rescale, so it needs to rescale to have the same sample variance as coincident index. This is the coincident index. So we need to find STT and we need to find BCT by multiplying STT by the ratio of standard deviation of BCT. So scale STT by multiplying with ratio of standard deviation of BCT to the standard deviation of STT. So take this standard deviation of these and standard deviation of these, take a ratio and multiply with STT, the big one, to scale it. Okay, business cycle model. I'm already very excited. LFAC B cycle. LFAC B cycle. See what functions? Wrapper function. Lambda 1 to 6, then phi B7 B8 1 0. Right. This follows the equations that we studied earlier. Remember that. Today, in fact, when we were talking about this, we have seen how these equations look. Basically, Let me see if I can show you a business cycle model. Extension of Kalman filters. Five one five two one zero. Okay, 515210, two factor, right? Diagonal elements. Then the question comes in regards to diagonal elements. R, okay, and 9 to 14. So 1 to 6, lambda is 1 to 6, 0, 6. So first we have 6 variables, so 6 lambdas, 2 autoregressive parameters. This is how they're represented, because we know from the question that is a 2 by 2. Yeah, from the question, as well as we must have a problem that corresponds to this. Anyway, it's a 2 by 2, so it's a 2 factor model, right? Oh, 1 factor, but two autoregressive parameters. So 1 factor, that's why 1 0, because it's a 1 factor model, autoregressive parameters. Then R is 9 to 14, the size of obviously y, 6 squared. Then Q is diagonal 1 to zeros, which equals length of phi minus 1, zeros, rows is length of phi minus 1 rows, 1 column. Identity matrix, length of phi is 2 minus 1, so 1 rows, 1 column. 1 diagonal ones will be in 1 rows and 1 column. We could have simply mentioned it manually, but this is a technique. Zeros, number of rows of phi, length of phi minus 1, whatever the length of phi is, that is minus 1. Length give you the maximum dimension, so there is this one, and then we call for the function. So we have the Kalman function, lambda r cube blah blah blah. We initialize as before. There is no, basically again I'm repeat, there is no exogenous component here, just like everything is just like before. No changes, not a single deviation. If there is an exogenous component, that would have been appeared in here, but no, that didn't appear. Then a smooth factor. Smooth factor is first start with the parameter vectors, then allocate arrays for 1011, 1011 and SS. At least 5 zeros will be coming, because 10 T rows K column, 11 T rows S is, S10, S11 K columns. Then P10 is 3D matrix, KKT, KKT, SS is T rows 1 column. So initialize using Hamilton just like before up to this point. Then S11 is 1 rows 1 column, and P11 is a 3D matrix updated from, taken from here, representation. Then main loop, the whole thing repeats again in your main loop. The smooth factor, as we know, in SS will store S11, which will go up by S11, and J is 1 to T minus 1, 2 to T or 1 to T minus 1. That is the regular autoregressive structure, as we already know. So basically J, we know P11, we had what again, P11 is P11 here, phi inverse of P21. P2 is the update, P11 is update, P2 is prediction. P11 is update, P2 is prediction. Then S1 for all parameters, for all sample, and then S1 1 J into S2 1 for all the samples. You see, this is not for all the samples. For all the samples, S2 1 for all SSS S2 1 for all samples, S2 1, simple S2 1. Anyway, for all samples is SS, for just one sample is S10. That's the only thing that matters. SS is prediction, update and prediction. This is update, prediction, that's all. And then we do the regular thing, the business cycle, called the bring in the data, transform indicator, start the estimation with some initial starting values, optimize it, estimate the parameters, find Hessian. Now do the second part of the equation, which is we already found smooth and conditional mean. Look for the coincident index. So coincident index, coincident 12 0 minus 0 12, BC minus mean BC. Taking the BC minus mean BC is coincident index. So business cycle, compute and scale the smooth factor. Call the smooth factor. You have the smooth factor with you already. Coincident index, compute the, so smooth factor is all rows one column. This is the function, isn't it? Yeah, based on business cycle based on smooth factor. Scale it. Standard, take the two standard deviations and multiply the smooth factor with the ratio. Then create the plot of one with smooth factor, one with based on coincident index. Smooth factor gives you the forecast or prediction. The sequence is created here, right? Sequences start here, grow up, steps are here, total will be this. Okay, so this is where we end our Kalman filter discussion, and that was a very good journey with you. We skipped two things. One is capital asset pricing model, and one is Hedrick Prescott. I don't think Hedrick Prescott is important. It's just changing of the some initial estimates, nothing else. Because we just need a filter, Hedrick Prescott, and we will never need it. If you ever need it, just email me. KPM on the other hand is based on nothing. You see log likelihood, again just like that. Multivariate Kalman section, just like that. Extract smooth factor, just like that, and call them up. You load your data, compute the return, compute excess market return on SP500, fine. Estimate parameter with restrictions, re-estimate without restrictions. We've done that many times. Estimate excess return on wealth mean. So excess return is basically the smoothened one. KPM regression estimate. In KPM regression estimate beta, we use market SP, regression Y on this once, and market SP500. Market SP compute excess market return. This is the excess market return that we are estimating beta with that. So we have OLS, excess market return, we have OLS, we have Kalman filter, and we have Kalman filter scaled. And scaled is taking the smoothen factor, standard deviation of S11, which is standard deviation of Kalman filter, and standard deviation of OLS. Okay, so which one is better? Kalman filter estimation is better, or the OLS estimation is better? This is OLS estimation, this is Kalman filter estimation, and this is scaled, Kalman filter scaled. Obviously Kalman filter estimation will be much better and efficient than OLS. So program to estimate a KPM model and with Kalman filters and estimate the excess return on invested wealth. So how do we find the excess return? Excess return is given to us by the smooth end, but nothing changes in the equation. We have the excess return when we have the smooth end factor, because SP400 excess return is, you have to read the question for that, and I think excess return question is given to us. Here, right? Excess return, compute the excess return on all invested using the updated conditional mean, is exactly same as before. Updated conditional mean and compute the estimated proxy variable, so it's exactly the same. Okay, so we just do an analysis and find this and compare this excess return with our Kalman algorithm, and we have a line of excess returns. We have a forecast for excess return with the smoothened one. So yeah, the concept is not bad. We are forecasting, we are making predictions on returns, which is really nice and usable. Okay, given we have basically this KPM regression at all is not important, we can simply take the data and find a smoothened lambda that gives you an addition, an excess on the wealth prediction, which is really good usage. I'll probably try and do it. So thank you very much, and you have a great day. Our econometric session is almost completed, and I'm hoping to just upload estimation by simulation. If possible, that's fine. If not possible, I'll probably not spend much time onto that. Thank you again and again, beautiful people.